Welcome to my channel. If you've enjoyed watching one or two of our videos and haven't subscribed yet, click that subscribe button now for more captivating stories like this. Don't miss a single story. Our tales commences in the morning on the royal estate of the Welton family. A young man woke up in his bed and let out a heavy sigh. He got up, realizing that he had once again had the same dream. This young man is named Jamie Welton, the eldest son of the Welton royal family and the rightful heir. He is also a powerful sorcerer known as Diablo Wolfir, who was recently defeated. That day, a seal appeared beneath his feet, and he proclaimed that even the 12 gods couldn't defeat him. They could only seal him away. He laughed at the irony and remarked that when he is reborn, their bright lights would be extinguished, and darkness would prevail. He vowed to torment them until their deaths, as they would beg for release. However, God responded that they would anticipate that moment, but first, he would endure eternal suffering. Thus, the 12 gods were able to seal him away. However, after a considerable amount of time, a gap appeared in their barrier, allowing him to escape. As a result, he was reborn as the son of the Welton family. Upon his rebirth, he was greeted by the enthusiastic voices of his parents. The man told his wife that their son had her eyes, marveling at their sparkle. She replied that their son looked just like him and encouraged him to admire his beautiful eyes. Little Jamie didn't understand what had happened and tried to speak, but only incomprehensible sounds came out. He wondered where he was and what was happening, unable to communicate properly. Consequently, he became an adored aristocrat, cherished by his parents. 9 years had passed since then, and as Jamie reminisced about his past, the nanny hurried towards him down the corridor. He looked out the window, taking a deep breath, expecting another mundane day. The nanny entered his room and greeted the young master. Jamie turned around and wished her a good morning. She approached him and inquired about his early activities. He replied that he was admiring the morning sky, remarking on its beauty. The nanny was delighted, praising the young master's wonderful nature. Jamie, however, looked away, contemplating the true meaning of wonderful. The nanny proceeded to dress him, acknowledging the beauty of the sky but reminding him that his parents were waiting for him. Jamie happily consented, and the nanny led him to the dining room, where his family was already seated. His mother greeted him with a good morning, and the rest of the family followed suit. Jamie waved at them and joined them for breakfast, sitting next to his little sister. His mother commented on how adorable their children were, noting their resemblance to her. Jamie couldn't help but think that she wasn't his real mother but rather the daughter of the noble Bell family, Sears Bell Welton. His father, the head of the royal family, Argano Welton, was one of the 5 sword masters in their kingdom. Argano expressed that their children were angels who took after their mother, emphasizing their sparkling eyes. Jamie observed the little girl next to him and considered her to be his little sister. Sarah placed a piece of food on her fork and instructed her brother to open his mouth wider. Jamie listened to her and expressed gratitude for the delicious food she was feeding him. In return, Jamie also took some food on his fork and began to feed Sarah, knowing it was something she enjoyed. Their parents watched them happily, but Jamie turned away to conceal his displeased expression. He found the situation boring and longed for some solitude. After breakfast, Jamie retreated to his room and buried his face in his pillow, reflecting on how adorable they could be. Embracing the pillow, he contemplated the numerous activities he could engage in within the mansion, including the private library. In his younger years, Jamie had once wished for death due to his inability to speak normally, feeling as if his tongue was too short. However, he now cherished the mansion and all its possibilities. Suddenly, a flying eye flew up to Jamie and perched on his head, providing him with a sense of alertness and preventing him from feeling tired. Jamie saw this as a newfound ability, a result of his rebirth. He crushed the flying eye in his hand, pondering the persistence of the 12 deities who still clung to their beliefs and aspirations like parasites. Examining the black blood staining his hand, Jamie acknowledged that, for the time being, this might be the extent of his capabilities. However, he took solace in the fact that information on dark magic was scarce in this era, giving him an advantage with time on his side. Jamie hoped the gods would continue to favor him as they had in the past so he could grow stronger. Just then, the nanny unexpectedly entered the room and informed Jamie that it was time to read children's books with Madam. Jamie remained silent, and the nanny called out to him. Jamie swiftly turned around with a smile and assured the nanny that he would join them shortly. At that moment, thoughts of curses flashed through Jamie's mind, dreading the need to play the role of the cute boy again. He yearned to be sealed away once more. Jamie followed the nanny until they reached his mother and sister. Sears urged Jamie to come quickly, and he obediently approached them, sitting on the floor in front of his mother. With a smile, he asked her which book she would read to them that day. Sears and Sarah were initially surprised by his behavior, but they both embraced him tightly. His mother affectionately referred to him as her sweet little baby, remarking on how cute he was and how he was her darling. Jamie endured this display of affection, and his mother announced that they would be reading a book called The Great Magician Heinz. She asked if they liked the name. The children settled down next to their mother, and she began reading a fairy tale. After a while, she closed the book and declared that Heinz lived happily ever after. She asked if they enjoyed the book. Jamie smiled and expressed his desire to become a cool magician like Heinz. His mother replied, complimenting his intelligence and expressing her confidence in his success. She mentioned that he had already surpassed his 3 magic teachers. Jamie wondered if she was mocking him, perhaps because he had outperformed the teachers she had hired for him. Sears gently patted his head and shared that his father had invited the most powerful magician specifically for Jamie. Jamie studied his mother's face and concluded that she wasn't joking. Finally, he smiled and exclaimed how amazing it was to have a wonderful dad. He stood up from the sofa, and his mother inquired if he was going to the library. She advised him not to spend his time reading there but rather to enjoy the fresh air. She extended her arms and invited him to come and embrace her. Jamie let out a heavy sigh, wishing he could just leave. Despite his reluctance, he still hugged his mother, and she commented on how sweet he was. She suggested that he go play with her instead of going to the library. As she squeezed him tightly, Jamie's thoughts screamed for her to stop. He realized that time had passed and decided to sit on a chair near the windows to read a book. Closing the book, he felt disappointed that there was nothing interesting about the use of mana in it. He wondered if there was even a single useful book in the library. Feeling like it was already lunchtime, Jamie grew tired of eating with his family 3 times a day. He resolved to come back before the nanny fetched him. Leaving the library, he encountered an old man in the corridor. The old man looked at a statue and commented on the Welton family's use of a rare artifact as decoration. Jamie wondered who the old man was. Finally noticing Jamie, the old man greeted him. Jamie observed the old man and thought that he possessed a significant amount of mana, flowing from him like an unceasing storm. He grew cautious and questioned how the old man had arrived there. He clenched his fist and considered if the old man was a robber, but his calm demeanor didn't match that of an invader in a sword master's mansion. The old man noticed Jamie's reaction and Jamie asked who he was and how he had gotten there, noting that the place was not a walk-through yard. The old man sensed the aura emanating from Jamie and compared him to a tiger cub that would grow into a tiger, just like his father. The old man didn't answer, frustrating Jamie, who believed the old man should have knelt before him. Irritated by the old man's calm behavior and the way he appraised him, Jamie decided to use magic to show the old man what would happen if his guard was down. The old man noticed and realized that the rumors about Jamie's strength were not true. He became more curious about what Jamie would do and decided to use magic as well, contemplating Jamie's true strength. Jamie noticed the old man's actions and became enraged. He, Diablo Wolfir, who in his past life almost destroyed all the gods, sent a flash of magic at the old man. However, the old man remained unaffected, standing in place while a little dust rose at the entrance to the dining room. Jamie realized that his attack had done nothing. The old man smiled widely, amazed that Jamie was only 9 years old. He exclaimed that it was a good try and now it was his turn. He directed his magic towards Jamie, who realized that the spell wasn't aimed at him, relieving him from the need to dodge. The old man was taken aback and thought to himself that the boy didn't even flinch. At that moment, Argano, the boy's father, stepped in and protected his son from the magic. He approached his son and asked if he was all right. Jamie confirmed that he was fine and pretended to wipe away tears, assuring his father that he was okay. Argano was surprised, thinking that his child had been crying. He turned angrily towards an old man named Marquis Linmal and expressed his desire to have a conversation with him. Jamie looked at Marquis with a mischievous smile, noticing the difference in his behavior, and thought to himself that acting more modestly in front of his father. Jamie let out a laugh and remarked that it was quite amusing, even envying Marquis. Argano was surprised by the situation and thought that Marquis had suddenly attacked his child. Concerned, they both retreated to Argano's office and began to have tea. Argano placed his cup on the table and stated that Jamie was his son and the heir of the Welton family. Marquis took a sip of tea and replied that he was aware of that. Argano, displeased, questioned what Marquis meant by his statement. Marquis advised him to calm down, as his aura made him feel uneasy, as one would expect from a swordmaster. The Marquis inquired about how much Argano knew about his son. Argano asked what he should know, and Marquis replied that he should be aware of his son's brilliance. Argano became angry, stating that this was the reason he trusted Marquis, who believed that Argano was genuinely furious. Marquis mentioned that Argano seemed to have no knowledge about his son, and he decided to pretend he hadn't heard Argano's words and declined to accept Jamie as his student. Argano asked for clarification, noting that Marquis was considered the most powerful 8th grade magician, so it was unlikely that he would fail to recognize his son, Jamie. Argano think to himself, is Jamie not that talented as he thought? Marquis noticed Argano's doubts and clarified that it was not what Argano thought. Argano asked Marquis to be more precise, and Marquis explained that he couldn't take his son as an apprentice because he wouldn't be able to handle him. Argano was surprised and asked who could handle a son that an 8th grade magician couldn't. Marquis smiled and revealed that his son could anticipate his actions. Argano found it impossible to believe, but Marquis added that Jamie had also noticed his spell passing by without flinching. Moreover, Jamie had already achieved the level of a 3rd-class magician through self-training alone, and if they disregarded the limitations of his body, his level might even surpass the 4th grade. Argano, with a pleased expression, considered Marquis's words. Marquis described Jamie as a genius, or rather, a monster, a true monster who didn't need a teacher but only their support to continue improving. Marquis speculated that they might have given birth to a legendary 9th grade magician. Argano remained silent, his hand clenched into a fist in surprise, contemplating the possibility of his son becoming a legendary 9th grade magician. Marquis stood up from the couch, apologized for attacking Jamie, and expressed excitement about the immense discoveries awaiting in magic, or rather, the whole world. With a laugh, he vanished from the office, accompanied by bright sparks. Argano continued to ponder the recent events, leaning his head back and sighing heavily. Night fell, and Jamie returned to his room, expressing his exhaustion. His mother became aware of what the old man had done, and she began to show her concern once again. She embraced Jamie tightly and asked if he was all right, assuring him that she would handle the situation with the old man. Jamie felt that he had wasted a lot of time and removed his jewelry. He remarked that he could see the true essence of the spell. He acknowledged that it was not bad in terms of composition, technique, balance, and type. However, what impressed him more was not Marquis but his father, Count Argano Welton. Jamie smiled and chuckled, acknowledging that he knew his father was strong, but he didn't realize just how powerful he was. He believed that his father deserved that strength. Suddenly, Marquis's voice came from behind Jamie, asking what was so amusing. Jamie turned around and saw the old man sitting on his bed, his face contorted with a dreadful grimace. Marquis questioned whether Jamie was so lost in his thoughts that he hadn't even noticed him. Startled, Jamie screamed in fear and fell to the floor, exclaiming his surprise at Marquis's presence. Marquis laughed and asked if that meant Jamie was easily scared. Jamie inquired how Marquis had managed to enter his room. Marquis got up from the bed and revealed that he had teleported there. Jamie speculated that his father must have spared Marquis's life, as he knew the old man was unusual. But Marquis's ability to teleport without any difficulty surprised him. Marquis grinned and commented on Jamie's behavior, noting that he was so humble when his father was around but acted differently with Marquis. Jamie stood up from the floor and retorted, asking if Marquis thought that family and strangers were the same. The old man laughed and called Jamie a funny fellow, expressing his regret that he wasn't a bit stronger. Jamie then questioned Marquis about his identity and why he was looking at him in such a manner, considering that they had only recently met. In response, Marquis handed Jamie a book and said it was for him. Jamie wondered if it was a magical memoir. As the book landed in Jamie's hands, he asked Marquis why he had given it to him. Marquis explained that the magic he used had become outdated long ago, so he decided to pass the book on to Jamie. Indignant, Jamie thought about Marquis's comment and felt humiliated, wondering if his magic was already considered outdated. He averted his gaze, pursed his lips, and pondered the situation. Marquis asked if Jamie was deeply moved by the gift, and he revealed that the book contained many of his original spells, making Jamie the first to read it. Jamie's thoughts shifted, realizing that the book contained spells created by this great magician. He marveled at how different the magic of this time was compared to his own. Jamie referred to his magic as ancient, but he resolved to show Marquis more. Suddenly, Marquis spoke again, and Jamie looked up from the book. Marquis began to vanish and expressed his high hopes for Jamie, wondering what Jamie would become the next time they met. With Marquis's disappearance, Jamie replied confidently that he would become much stronger than Marquis anticipated. Now, Jamie intended to study the contents of the book, which contained all the magic existing in the world. He understood that the most effective way to learn how to control mana was to pass it through oneself and absorb it with the heart. However, Jamie acknowledged a significant challenge: the limitation of mana that passed through. Marquis commented on his own spells being too old, leaving Jamie curious about what kind of spells Marquis had used. Jamie flipped through the book, finding it amusing but still challenging. He realized that he needed to sense every particle of mana so that it could flow through his entire body and skin. Exhausted, he wearily lay down on the bed and contemplated the immense effort required to surpass those who were skilled in these old methods. He had already identified two disadvantages, but he smiled at the thought that he, Diablo Wolfer, would rise above them. With determination, he rose from the bed and eagerly opened the book, acknowledging that the old man had opened his eyes to a new world. He pledged to read every page of this precious book, but he knew he needed assistance. Snapping his fingers, a flying eye appeared above his hand and perched on his shoulder. Jamie asked if it could spray some mana there, and the familiar responded with a sound. Concentrating, he opened his eye wider, realizing that the first disadvantage of this technique was the limited absorption of mana particles by his body. He understood the need to observe the proportions strictly. However, with his loyal companion, Blackie, who had a soul contract with him, the issue of proportions could be resolved. Blackie could burn the required amount of mana, eliminating any problems. Once the first disadvantage was solved, Jamie believed the second one would be less problematic. The second drawback was his body's limit on the amount of mana his heart could accept. However, he devised a plan to distribute the mana to different parts of his body, removing any restrictions. The next morning, the nanny called the Count to Jamie's room, expressing her concern. The Count entered Jamie's room and observed the swirling mana around him, marveling at his son's hidden talents. He instructed the nanny to leave Jamie undisturbed for the day and station someone at his door. Satisfied, he contemplated how his son would become a magician rather than a swordsman, possibly influenced by his wife's family. The Count smiled, acknowledging that his son's magical abilities exceeded his expectations. Time passed, and Jamie finished his practice, opening his eyes with joyous shouts of success. Initially, manipulating mana proved challenging due to its unpredictable movements, but after several attempts, he triumphed. However, he realized that his current limit was only at the 4th level, which disappointed him as he had hoped to achieve more. The little black familiar sat on his head and squeaked, capturing Jamie's attention. He inquired about the familiar's message, realizing that he had no desire to enhance his body further at this moment, acknowledging his youth and relative weakness. The familiar moved to his shoulder and squeaked again, to which Jamie smiled and agreed. He would be patient and bide his time, knowing that these obstacles were not insurmountable. With determination, he commanded Blackie to utilize the invisibility spell, and as if by magic, he vanished into thin air. Jamie expressed his desire to meet his father, realizing that he needed to ensure his mana remained hidden. He believed that everything would not be okay if his father were to suddenly discover his magical abilities. Blackie concealed his mana, and Jamie noted that he could barely sense its presence, as expected from his familiar. Confident that his father would not notice anything amiss, Jamie left his room, accompanied by a black aura. Meanwhile, the Count was engaged in a meeting, wondering why the priest had come and interrupted his busy schedule. The priest explained that he simply wanted to greet the Count and express gratitude for giving the Zenith cult an opportunity in the Haz lands, where there had never been any issues concerning religion. The Count agreed, stating that he believed it would be beneficial to support the community and make the Zenith cult the greatest in his lands, given the increasing support it garnered. The priest understood that the Count wanted to assert his authority and cautioned against treating the people as mere followers of the gods, urging the Count to take him more seriously. The count suggested ending the conversation, acknowledging his busy schedule. The priest thanked him for his concern and bid him farewell, expressing blessings from the great zenith. As soon as the door closed, the count's smile vanished from his face. Meanwhile, Jamie hid behind a column, observing the priest. He recognized the crescent moon symbol with a yellow sphere and the dark aura emanating from the priest. He wondered how and why the priest was present in his father's domain and why his father had chosen the zenith cult among all religions. Determined to prevent the spread of this faith in his lands, Jamie resorted to his only option, given the circumstances that limited his freedom of action. Since the religion had official sanction from his father, the only way to eliminate it was to compel his father to drive them away. Jamie decided to meet his father and initiate his investigation. He approached his father's door and announced himself as Jamie. They both moved to the living room, where Jamie updated his father on his progress. His father expressed satisfaction, asking if Jamie had overcome all challenges. Jamie confirmed his success, and his father remarked that he must truly enjoy magic. Jamie questioned if something was wrong, and his father admitted that he had always envisioned Jamie growing up as an ordinary child. He expressed concern about the complexities of living as a prodigy, where initial applause often turned into bullying when the novelty wore off. He questioned whether it was truly beneficial for Jamie to become a genius. Gripping the armrest, he informed Jamie that if he didn't enjoy practicing magic, he could quit and pursue other endeavors. However, if Jamie had made a firm decision, his father would not oppose him but would provide the best support possible. Jamie smiled reassuringly and assured his father that he would never give up magic. Argano smiled back and expressed his approval. However, as he looked at his son, he couldn't help but wonder how a 9-year-old boy could possess such a vast amount of mana. He could sense mana emanating from Jamie's entire body, which both amazed and scared him. Argano worriedly questioned if mana could be stored somewhere other than the heart. He then asked if Jamie had learned everything from the memoirs given to him by Marquis Linmul the previous day. Jamie confirmed his father's suspicions and added that he had even improved upon some of the techniques described in the book. A bead of cold sweat rolled down Argano's face as he contemplated what Marquis had done. He couldn't fathom how much Jamie could learn in just one day, and he began questioning if his son was truly destined to become a legendary 9th-grade magician. Chuckling, Argano mused that compared to Jamie, he himself was insignificant. Jamie noticed the change in his father's demeanor and asked if something was wrong. Argano smiled and assured him that he was proud of him, laughing because he felt an extra sense of pride that day. Jamie joined in the laughter, but it felt forced to him, and he wondered when his father would stop patting his head. Suddenly, Argano pointed at Blackie, Jamie's familiar, and asked if Jamie had summoned it himself. Jamie became frightened and asked if that's how his father saw Blackie. In a panic, Blackie started flying above Jamie's head, and Jamie couldn't believe what was happening. He distinctly remembered casting an invisibility spell on Blackie, yet his father could still see him. Argano, with a smile, asked if Blackie was a bat, noting its cuteness. He gestured with his arms, indicating the size. He perceived Blackie to be. Jamie marveled at his father's strength, wondering if he had realized that Jamie had used dark magic to shape Blackie. Jamie explained that he had intentionally given Blackie the form of a bat to hide him, as he thought his father would be surprised to learn that Jamie had done it himself. Argano immediately embraced Jamie and expressed his pride, emphasizing that his surprise would stem not from fear, but from Jamie's talent. He was incredibly proud to be Jamie's father. After a while, Jamie left the room, feeling exhausted and contemplating why they loved him so much. Night had fallen, and Jamie donned his cloak, calling for Blackie. The familiar promptly appeared, flapping its large black wings. Jamie conveyed the need to uncover the reason behind their presence in his territory, and they decided it was time to take action. With that, Blackie picked up Jamie, and together they soared into the night sky above the city. Meanwhile, in a dark alley, two men from a criminal organization met. One asked about the boss's instructions, and the other replied that they were to follow the plan precisely if they wanted to avoid death. He let out a sigh, and his friend expressed his contemplation about what the future held for them. A member of the rebel criminal organization named Philip admitted that he didn't fully comprehend the extent of what they had gotten involved in. Jans asked if Philip didn't understand that he would make any sacrifice to achieve his own goals. He mentioned that Hay is a land where even Earl Welton himself would allow their organization to coexist peacefully with everyone, as long as they didn't cross a certain line. However, human trafficking completely crossed that line and eliminated any notion of peaceful coexistence. Philip responded by saying that if they were lucky, they could escape without getting caught, and no one would apprehend them. Jans countered that he was the only one who believed that, as sooner or later, they would inevitably be caught. He questioned whether Philip knew how much the Count loved his children, and what would happen if he discovered they were using other children for their illicit trade on his own land. Jans asserted that if that day came, all criminal organizations would be eradicated from the city forever. Philip mentioned that the boss seemed confident they wouldn't be caught. Jans clenched his teeth and sarcastically asked if he thought the sword master wouldn't be able to capture them, considering it a joke. Philip claimed that Han, their contact, assured them that his people would assist them. Jans retorted that Han was willing to do anything, to which Philip sighed and inquired about their next course of action, whether they should escape or turn themselves in. Jans expressed a preference for running away, citing one of the rules of the underworld that forbade betrayal and disclosure of plans to third parties. Philip agreed, and they agreed to attempt an escape. Jans asked if Philip had any plans, acknowledging the vastness of the lands they were in, and how thoroughly they would be pursued. Philip admitted he didn't know, and they decided to play it by ear. Meanwhile, Jamie stealthily approached them, and Jans questioned who came up with the idea of engaging in the slave trade in that location. Jamie peered around the corner, and Philip speculated that the boss likely received an offer and impulsively seized the opportunity, but he didn't understand the motives behind it. Suddenly, both Jans and Philip noticed Jamie's presence and demanded to know who he was. Jamie smiled mischievously and replied with a hint of intrigue, leaving Jans clenched his fist and suggested letting Jamie die if he didn't want to talk. Jans and Philip lunged at Jamie, but to their surprise, he vanished. They frantically searched for him, wondering where he had gone. Jans concluded that there was no one there, but then Jamie's voice echoed, causing them to freeze and listen. Jamie approached them, and expressed his curiosity, stating that he wanted to hear all the details. He used his magic, which frightened the two men. Subsequently, they sat down in front of Jamie and recounted everything. Both Jans and Philip fell silent, and Jamie pondered the fact that they were involved in human trafficking, including children. These were the kind of people his father despised the most. He couldn't understand what these foolish individuals were thinking and if they wanted to be killed. Jamie found their actions infuriating and bit his lip, reflecting on how not only did these thick-headed individuals manipulate others at their whim, but now people dared to manipulate others, no different from the gods they despised. He wondered what the boss was thinking when assigning them this job, considering he should know his father's character well. Jamie had a foreboding feeling about the situation. He leapt off the boxes and then used his magical powers on the men, commanding them to go to the Count's estate and divulge everything they knew. The men immediately obeyed and rose to their feet. Jamie remarked that it was going to be a stormy morning as the robbers slowly made their way towards the estate. He instructed Blackie that they needed to return, but before they could take off, the two men were swiftly thrown back with incredible speed. Philip crashed into the wall, leaving a large hole in his stomach, while his friend was severely burned. Philip's lifeless body fell onto the road with a distinct thud, and Jamie turned around to assess the aftermath. Suddenly, laughter emanated from behind him as a man ridiculed them for being foolish idiots. One of his friends cautioned him for being too loud, suggesting that the guards were likely already on their trail. Jamie wondered where this madman had come from and, using his magic, questioned if he dared to harm those who followed his commands. A magic circle materialized behind him, and he used his powers on the corpses of the robbers, forbidding them from dying until they fulfilled his instructions. Their wounds began to heal, catching the attention of Hanai, who had injured them. Han noticed Jamie and instructed his subordinates to take a good look at who they had there, ordering them to capture Jamie along with the two idiots. Jamie continued his spellcasting while Hanai warned his subordinates not to let them escape. Two men were dispatched to drag away the bodies of Philip and Jans, whom Jamie had almost healed. Hanai declared that they would kill the two later. A tear rolled down Philip's cheek as he pleaded for Jamie's help. Jamie watched as they were hauled away, calling Han scum. Hanai laughed and taunted Jamie, telling him to die, and proceeded to attack Jamie with magical projectiles, piercing his body and urging him to die. Hanai reveled in the act, finding it exhilarating and relishing Jamie's screams before finally burning his body with magic. Gazed at the charred remains with horror and asked Hanai why he had harmed them. Hanai turned to him and questioned what Jans meant, asserting that he was certain Jamie had attacked them. Suddenly, Jamie's voice resonated near Hanai's ear, asking if that was all he could do. Hanai quickly withdrew, and Jamie inquired if he was having fun. Hanai, filled with fear, asked what Jamie meant. Jamie repeated the question, asking if Hanai enjoyed killing his partner. Hanai wondered who Jamie was and why he was still alive. He also noticed an ominous aura emanating from Jamie's body. Jamie stated that Hanai underestimated him, considering himself only a third-class wizard. Hanai threatened to kill Jamie, casting a powerful fire spell, believing it would reduce Jamie's small body to ashes and leave no trace behind. Hanai attacked, commanding Jamie to die, but a bright flash illuminated told Hanai that he should let him explain how the human mind works. Hanai stood frozen in shock, and Jamie remarked that people feel utterly helpless when faced with individuals who are much stronger than them, which is why he relishes manipulating those who are weaker. Hanai collapsed to his knees, his face hitting the ground, and he lay motionless. His partner, filled with fear, exclaimed that Jamie had effortlessly defeated Hanai, describing him as a monstrous being. They needed to escape. Jamie waved his hand and suggested that they should consider themselves unlucky. Dark streams of magic enveloped their bodies as Jamie clenched his fist, utilizing destructive magic. The magic compressed the bodies of the bandits, causing them to scream in agony. Jamie approached Hanai and declared that his time had come. He seized Hanai by the hair, lifting his head, and demanded that his slave answer all his questions. Hanai referred to Jamie as his master and obediently began speaking about young children. Jamie dismissed it, stating that he had heard it all before, deeming it a waste of time. Jamie believed that his father would eventually find out the information through other means, thanks to those two idiots. He released Hanai and contemplated what to do with him. Despite having halted Hanai's death, Jamie believed that his soul was already nearly destroyed. Though his body appeared unharmed, as a third-class magician, he wouldn't last long. Jamie considered turning him into an undead creature, but due to the rapid decay of his soul, it would be a temporary solution. He smiled, realizing that he had no choice but to employ another method. Knowing that he possessed sufficient mana as a third-class magician, he pointed his hand at Hanai's head, expressing his appetite. After absorbing the mana, Hanai's body began to boil. Jamie remarked that it wasn't bad and wiped his lips with a handkerchief. Due to Jamie's human characteristics, the mana contained many impurities, but he considered himself fortunate to have consumed such a large amount. He shifted his attention to Philip and Jans, deliberating on what to do with them. Approaching them, he mentioned that he had shared some of his mana with them but doubted they could endure in their current state. Sparks of dark magic emitted from Jamie's body, and Blackie materialized from it, emitting a questioning squeak. Jamie informed the two surviving bandits that they still had unfinished business, preventing him from allowing their deaths. He employed magic and acknowledged that it had been a while since he had last used necromancy. Necromancy involved reviving dead bodies, similar to resurrection, but with a distinction that the resurrected bodies were no longer considered living beings. They became undead creatures, existing in a state that defied the laws of nature, both alive and dead simultaneously. Jamie declared them his faithful servants, granting them a second chance at life despite their demise. He requested Blackie's assistance, and together they ascended into the sky, awaiting Jamie's command. Jamie announced that they were commencing and used magic on Philip and Jans, instructing them to relinquish their skills and embrace rebellion. Philip's veins bulged, and Jamie mused that he was still experiencing the afterlife. Jamie informed them that immortality awaited, urging them to reject death. Tears welled up in the bandits' eyes as they rolled back, and Jamie continued to revive them, calling out to them. Both bandits screamed, and with Blackie's assistance, Jamie completed the process. Jamie ceased his actions, and Philip and Jans knelt before him, awaiting his orders. Jamie looked at them incredulously, wondering if it was over. However, he noticed lingering black smoke and questioned whether he had made a mistake. The little black creature landed on his head and emitted apologetic squeaks. Jamie expressed his displeasure, questioning what the creature had told him and what was wrong with him. He reassured Blackie, acknowledging that he himself might be the one in the wrong, though it was difficult for him to admit. Blackie squealed. Frustrated, he stretched Blackie to the side, but Jamie stated that he couldn't keep them anyway and decided to get rid of them. And acknowledged that the release of black smoke would hinder their ability to carry out Zenith's orders or move about unnoticed. Suddenly, the little black creature swung to the sides and bit Jamie on the cheek, much to his displeasure. It quickly flew away and settled on Daeon's head, collecting the dark haze. Jamie questioned its capability, and after chewing the dark haze, the haze disappeared completely. Jamie declared that he could now use them. Turning to Blackie, who had grown significantly in size, Jamie praised its efforts. He then turned to the bandits and suggested that they needed new names now that they were rebelling. He named Jans, Azard, and his friend, Riza. Jamie commanded them to rebel repeatedly until they regained consciousness. As Jamie waved his hand, they looked ahead in confusion. Jamie observed their puzzled expressions and decided to give them some time to recover. They remained silent until Azard asked if Jamie was the one who brought them back to life. Jamie confirmed it, causing Azard to feel scared and question who Jamie really was. Noting Jamie's youthful appearance and ominous aura, Azard likened him to a character from a childhood book, a sinister creature challenging the world. Jamie grinned and asked what was wrong, suggesting that he resembled a demon lord in their eyes. Nervously, Riza swallowed his saliva and boldly stated that while he couldn't determine if Jamie was a demon lord or something else, he appeared human to him. Jamie was surprised by the response, finding it interesting. He realized that his behavior had been excessively aggressive, as if he hadn't recognized that his master was now standing before him. He suspected flaws in his spell and extended his index finger forward, determined not to turn a blind eye to the situation. Then, he pointed his finger downward, causing Riza to fall to the ground, hitting his head. Jamie approached him and delivered a message, stating that he would forgive him this time, but any further disrespect would not go unpunished. Riza fearfully acknowledged his understanding. Jamie turned his attention to Azard and remarked that this applied to him as well. Azard agreed, and Jamie reflected on the essence of soul subjugation, where lives are bound by contracts regardless of personal desires. He recalled something and clarified that he was not a demon lord. Curiosity piqued, Azard inquired about Jamie's identity. Jamie removed his hood and replied with a smile, stating that he was an ordinary dark magician, a magician who once attempted to kill the gods and now existed solely for that purpose. He assigned them a task: to monitor the Zenith Church and gather information regarding it. They pledged their loyalty, and Jamie added another instruction: to bring him anyone who might possess knowledge about human trafficking, as he wanted that person to inform his father of everything. After giving the orders, Jamie disappeared without further commands. Riza looked up and sighed with relief, realizing he was gone. Azard also sighed, and they exchanged glances. Azard hesitantly suggested that they should start working, and Riza agreed, acknowledging that they couldn't disobey Jamie's orders. Meanwhile, Blackie expressed complaints to Jamie, who reassured the creature that everything would be fine and that their fear would prevent them from easily defying his commands. Blackie perched on Jamie's shoulder as he stated that with their help, his father would be able to address the issue of the slave trade. Once again, the little black creature bit Jamie on the cheek and squealed. Jamie responded, expressing his determination to put an end to human trafficking in the region, as it would ultimately fall under his control. Suddenly, footsteps approached, and Jamie told Blackie that they needed to conclude for the day. Unexpectedly, a boy collided with Jamie's back and fell to the ground. Irritated, Jamie turned around and questioned if the boy was blind. However, he quickly realized the boy's young age and paused. He was also a child. The boy confirmed and, as the little black creature clung to Jamie's hair, Jamie acknowledged that he was indeed only 9 years old. He forgave the boy this time but advised him to be more cautious in the future. Jamie distanced himself from the boy, who quietly muttered a comment about Jamie thinking he was an adult despite lacking any gray hair. Suddenly, Blackie tugged on Jamie's hair, prompting him to turn around and question the cause of the disturbance. Observing the boy's frown, Jamie wondered if Blackie's actions were in response to his joke about hair color. Indignantly, he scolded the boy, threatening consequences if he did not watch his language unless he wished to face dire consequences. The boy rushed forward in a state of fright and exclaimed his profuse apologies. Jamie let out a tired sigh and asked the little black creature if it was satisfied now. The little creature emitted a contented squeal, and Jamie urged them to quickly return home. They made their way back home, and Blackie glanced away guiltily. Jamie settled onto the bed and inquired if the boy even comprehended the gravity of his actions. The little black creature squeaked once more, and Jamie warned that if such behavior were to occur again, there would be more severe consequences. The creature squeaked again, prompting Jamie to ponder where it could have learned such behavior. He lay back on the bed, expressing exhaustion, realizing that he had expended more energy than anticipated. He had a great deal of work ahead of him, marking the end of his easy and carefree life. Furthermore, he anticipated the arrival of one of the gods he despised the most, Zenith, into his life and territory. The mere thought of Zenith caused him to clench his fist and place his hand on his forehead, asserting that he didn't care and challenging Zenith to try his best. He resolved to destroy all of Zenith's followers, regardless of their numbers. Meanwhile, his new subordinates diligently carried out their assigned tasks. Azard returned to the shelter and inquired about the whereabouts of the elder brother. Azard ignored the question and reiterated his inquiry. The person responded that Hanai had threatened to personally kill both of them, wondering why they were still alive. Azard's frustration compelled him to strike the wall and address the person as Pip, warning him not to repeat his question. Pip wondered about the source of Azard's newfound power and, more importantly, where the others had gone. He raised his hands, indicating his lack of knowledge regarding the elder brother's whereabouts. Ryza approached Pip and asked if he was certain, causing Pip to nervously stammer and affirm his certainty, fearing for his life. Ryza regarded him skeptically, feeling exhausted by the situation. He recognized the need to locate the boss in order to carry out their master's orders. Since the boss possessed knowledge about the city and potentially had information regarding the Zenith Church, there was a high probability of finding leads there. Ryza turned to Pip and inquired where he believed the boss might be. Pip, overcome by fear, realized he needed to provide a plausible answer to avoid dire consequences. He suggested checking nearby bars, as the boss had a fondness for women and alcohol. Azard agreed with Ryza's assessment, and then unexpectedly struck Pip in the face, reminding him that their master had instructed them to find any witnesses. They deliberated on the best hiding place, considering tying him up in the forest or locking him in the basement of his house. Ryza delivered a kick to Pip and proposed the latter option, stating that they had wasted enough time. Azard hoisted Pip over his shoulder, and they departed. As time passed, the boy opened a door and was met with a gruesome sight, a room filled with lifeless bodies. He entered the room and inquired about the situation, wondering if everyone was dead. He anticipated being punished again for failing to meet his quota from the previous day. However, it seemed there was no one present who could administer the beating. Realizing he needed to leave before anyone grew suspicious, he hurried towards the exit. The next morning, Jamie woke up, let out a yawn, and acknowledged his fatigue. It was no surprise considering how long he had slept. He realized he couldn't avoid encountering them any longer and proceeded to the dining room. He informed Blackie that he would have to keep him away to avoid attracting his father's attention. Blackie vanished, and Jamie entered the dining room. He greeted his parents and inquired about their sleep. His father wished him a good morning, and Sarah, his sister, mentioned that she had slept well the previous night. Jamie didn't notice his mother at the table and asked about her whereabouts. Suddenly, his mother playfully pounced on him from her hiding place, revealing that she was right there. Startled, Jamie let out a brief scream and asked where she had been hiding, admitting that he hadn't noticed her. She jokingly asked if he was serious, and Jamie averted his gaze, knowing all along that she had been standing behind the door. His mother affectionately patted his head and asked if her little Jamie had been scared. Jamie confirmed her words and reassured her that everything was fine now that he knew it was her. His mother smiled and commented on his good manners. Sensing what his mother was about to do, Jamie quickly redirected the conversation to focus on breakfast. His mother immediately embraced him, exclaiming how adorable he was and expressing her desire to hug him once again. Sarah joined in the hug, requesting one as well. In his mind, Jamie silently pleaded for someone to intervene. They all sat down at the table, and Sears hugged her daughter, calling her sweetie. Jamie looked at Sarah and felt the urge to squeeze her cheeks, as children's cheeks are always soft. He buried his head on the table, chastising himself for his thoughts. He had grown accustomed to this peaceful life. After finishing breakfast, Sears mentioned that everything would begin tomorrow. Her husband agreed, and Jamie, lifting his sister in his arms, asked what would happen tomorrow. Sears turned to her husband, indicating that she hadn't told them yet. She turned away and explained that she had forgotten. In the midst of worrying about her son, Jamie realized she was referring to the technique he had used before, understanding that she must have been greatly concerned. He lowered his gaze and apologized sincerely. His mother reassured him, saying she understood that nothing would happen to him. However, she cautioned that if he continued to exhaust himself, she might faint somewhere in the corridor due to her overwhelming sadness. Jamie promised that he wouldn't repeat his actions. Curiosity piqued, he asked again what would happen tomorrow. His mother chuckled and revealed that they would all be attending a grand ball together. Jamie realized it was the huge ball organized by Earl Simon and Earl Welton, where nearly all the nobility residing in the northern part of the Seldom Empire would be present. His mother expressed her excitement, noting that neither of them had ever attended a ball before and that it was the perfect time to do so, especially given their age. She was genuinely happy about it. Jamie sensed that his precious free time was coming to an end. As night fell, he once again donned his cloak and called for Blackie. Blackie clung to him as Jamie declared that they needed to visit the two individuals he referred to as blockheads. Upon arriving at Riza's house, Azard and Riza, who were seated at the table, immediately stood up to acknowledge Jamie's presence. Jamie removed his hood and inquired if they had accomplished the task he had assigned them. Riza apologized and admitted that they hadn't obtained any information about the Zenith cult. Jamie speculated that even members of Revel would struggle to gather information in just one day. He then asked about another task, prompting Riza to point towards the bound Pip and explain that they had made progress in that regard. Pip hummed and regarded Jamie with curiosity, wondering about the significance of their unusual hair color and whether they had been influenced by the Welton family. Riza informed Jamie that Pip was one of the members of Revel and that he also knew that Hanai was supposed to kill them. This revelation indicated that Pip was not an ordinary pawn. Azard chimed in, expressing his ignorance as well. Jamie decided to interrogate Pip and instructed Riza and Azard to remove the gag from his mouth. As soon as the rag was removed, Pip began pleading with Jamie, insisting that he genuinely didn't know anything. He offered to provide information if they spared his life. Jamie dismissed Pip's fear, referring to him as a child, which made Pip wonder why he felt goosebumps. Jamie assured Pip that he had no intention of killing him but wanted him to carry out specific tasks. Pip trembled in fear, feeling the overwhelming and terrifying power emanating from Jamie. He cried out and promised to do whatever Jamie asked, as long as he spared his life. Jamie noted Pip's loud outburst, causing Pip to fall silent and wonder why he suddenly couldn't speak. Jamie revealed that Pip only had to fulfill one task. He touched Pip's head and cast a spell, instructing him to go to the Count's estate and divulge everything about their organization's activities. Without uttering another word, Pip rose to his feet and left the house, making his way towards the estate. Jamie's subordinates watched over Pip as he departed, and Jamie reassured them that Revel was unlikely to capture him. However, he warned that his father would be the first to deal with him, emphasizing the need for them to leave the city and find a hiding place. The subordinates acknowledged Jamie's orders, and Blackie perched on his shoulder. Jamie inquired if they had any questions, to which they replied by bowing and affirming that their loyalty to the master's commands was unwavering. Riza added that he understood the reason behind Jamie's instructions. Jamie agreed, acknowledging that Riza seemed to grasp the gravity of their situation. He stated that it was likely his father would obliterate Revel, and he saw no value in his father learning about the existence of Riza and Azard. Jamie turned away and informed them that he would be absent for a few days, advising them to remain quiet until his return. They obediently followed his order, and Jamie left the house. Riza chased after him, calling out his name. Jamie turned around and asked what was the matter. Riza expressed his concerns about what they had become, implying that he knew they were already dead and that there was no way to change that fact. Riza didn't want to regress into his past life and was grateful for the strength he had gained. However, he still desired to understand the nature of the creature he had become. Jamie inquired about the specific information Riza sought, to which Riza responded that they were much more powerful than before. He wondered if this meant they had become top-ranked undead. Amy was taken aback by Riza's question and couldn't help but laugh. Riza immediately felt embarrassed and apologized if it was a foolish question. Jamie reassured him with a smile, saying that it wasn't stupid at all. He found it amusing because most people usually ask whether they truly became undead or not. He had never encountered someone who took it as lightly as Riza did. He found them to be intriguing individuals. Riza thanked him, and Jamie thought to himself that he had never met anyone quite like Riza. Most people refused to accept that they had turned into monsters and lost their humanity. But Riza and Azard were the complete opposite of those people. Azard also left the house, and Jamie thought that he had found good servants in Riza and Azard. He explained that they were just ordinary zombies whose appearances he had preserved from before they died. As zombies, their strength had increased, making them much stronger than ordinary people. Ryza became frustrated and lowered his eyes, acknowledging that they were merely ordinary zombies. Jamie laughed and told him that everything depended on them. Perhaps one day they would become zombies of the highest level. The guys were inspired by Jamie's words, and he informed them that he had to leave and that they needed to find a hiding place. They joyfully replied that they would wait for his return. Little Blackie squealed, and Jamie jokingly told him not to call them pathetic, as he found them quite interesting. They reminded him of someone from his past. Jamie concluded that they had been in the city long enough and needed to go back. That night, the Welton house was restless. One of the members of Revel, a large criminal organization in Hayes, decided to betray the group. Since the Count had to stay late for business, only 3 members of the Welton family went to Region, the largest city in the east. Jamie was riding in a carriage and contemplated that he could have used his teleportation skill to get there himself. He observed his mother and sleeping sister and realized that he was much stronger now than before, thanks to magic's incredible progress. However, he was uncertain about how much time had passed since his death, as the events after his demise were recorded in history books. He learned about an army of demons led by a demon lord attacking humans, but there had been no wars for the past few hundred years. Dark magic emanated from him, and he felt that the gods couldn't unite against him, which suited his plans. He acknowledged that many people would die, but it was no longer his concern. Sarah sensed the dark magic and winced, causing Jamie to regain control of himself. He thought about finishing the ball first. The carriage entered the city, adorned with beautiful decorations and a stunning temple nearby. Jamie admired the scenery and remarked on its beauty. His mother explained that Region was the most advanced city in their kingdom, with a massive amount of money flowing through it. Jamie couldn't help but be amazed, considering Selim to be one of the richest cities in the kingdom, thanks in large part to Region. The carriage came to a stop, and the coachman announced that they had arrived. Jamie expressed his overwhelming desire to see Count Simon, feeling as though his heart would leap out of his chest. His mother hugged him affectionately, commenting on how adorable he was and urging him not to worry. Jamie questioned why he needed all this attention, and his mother playfully asked if he was implying that his heart was about to jump out. She suggested that he could hold her hand if he wanted. Finally, his mother let him go and inquired if he admired Uncle Simon so much because he also aspired to become a magician. Jamie wearily confirmed this, feeling squeezed from both sides. His mother explained that Count Simon was an incredible individual, just like his father. Being a 7th grade mage, he held a prominent position as one of the 2 leaders of the kingdom's Eastern Council of Nobles and served as Lord of Region. His magical abilities were comparable to the Red Lotus, earning him the title of the Red Lotus Magician. Rumor had it that he could annihilate 1,000 people with a single spell. Curious about the person behind the title, Jamie asked his mother to describe Earl Simon. After a brief pause, she mentioned that his hair was as red as blood. Jamie found this slightly surprising but concluded that the color of his hair or his magical grade didn't matter to him. Instead, he wondered about his strength, which allowed him to take so many lives. He felt a desire to talk to him. As they entered the estate, Jamie reflected on the somewhat futile conversation he had with Marquis Linmal. It had been brief, leaving him pondering what his dialogue with Count Simon would be like. Sarah got out of the carriage and advised the children to follow her carefully. Jamie quickly disembarked, and a man approached them, addressing Jamie's mother as the wife of Earl Welton. She confirmed his statement, and the man offered to escort them to their chambers. He led them into opulent chambers, explaining that they would be their accommodations for the entire event. If they had any requests, they could inform their personal butler. Sarah remarked to Jamie about Count Simon's thoughtfulness, to which he agreed. The man then informed Jamie that he could use the room, leaving him impressed by the considerate gesture. He couldn't fathom sharing a room with his parents and appreciated the privacy. Sarah instructed her children to return to the chambers after they had settled their belongings. A few minutes later, a maid began braiding Sarah's hair, remarking on its smoothness and beauty. Jamie entered the room and couldn't help but express his surprise at his mother's beauty. Sarah laughed and asked if he thought she was pretty too. Jamie confirmed her statement, bringing joy to her heart. She rushed towards him, exclaiming how handsome he looked that day. The maid cautioned her to maintain composure to avoid ruining her appearance. Sarah turned around, her eyes welling up with tears, and asked if she could hug him just once. The maid regretfully informed her that it wouldn't be possible as it would wrinkle her dress. Jamie let out a sigh of relief, and another maid announced that the young lady, Sarah, was ready. Sarah emerged in an adorable dress, prompting her mother to scream with delight, expressing how cute she looked. Jamie observed Sarah and remarked that she looked like a doll. Sarah felt delighted and asked if she was cute. Jamie replied that she was indeed very nice but seemed uncomfortable. He suggested they be patient until the end of the holiday. Sarah agreed, and a maid suggested that the young master should also change his clothes. They all proceeded together to the banquet hall, where the festivities were just beginning. Jamie glanced around and wondered if ballrooms had always been this luxurious. They took their seats at the table, and he asked if Count Simon truly enjoyed such extravagance. His mother confirmed and mentioned that he would be particularly surprised when they met him in person. The other ladies noticed Sarah's mother, Sears, and identified her as Madame Welton. They hadn't seen each other in a long time, but they remarked on her enduring beauty. One of the ladies pointed out the exquisite dress Sears was wearing, made from organic cotton grown on their lands. She explained that Sears had personally designed the dress so that she could wear it even in winter. Sears expressed her gratitude for their compliments, while Jamie felt disgusted by their attempts to flatter his family. He had encountered many people like them in the past, who would grovel before those in power. It repulsed him, but he was glad that his mother knew how to handle such individuals. A man stepped forward into the center of the hall and greeted everyone who had come to Count Simon's ball. He introduced himself as Rael Banner, a member of the city's administrative bodies. After a few more words, he concluded his speech, announcing that the ball would begin soon. He urged everyone to take their seats and be ready to welcome Earl Simon and his family, who would arrive shortly. He pointed in the direction of the Count, and footsteps could be heard. The red-haired Count appeared before their eyes, causing Jamie to become very nervous upon seeing him. Count Simon acknowledged the guests, expressing his hope that everyone would enjoy the event. He continued walking, and Jamie thought that he was almost on the same level as Marquis Linmel, or perhaps even stronger. The Count approached their table, exceeding Jamie's expectations of the Red Lotus magician. Jamie found it intriguing. The Count approached Sears from behind, accompanied by his wife, and mentioned that they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Sears commented that she looked much better than she did last year and expressed her happiness that he was also in good health. The Count inquired if Count Welton, Sears' husband, would be present, and she replied that he would join them later as he had some issues to attend to. The Count understood the situation. He then looked at Jamie and asked if he was their son. Sears confirmed and introduced him as Jamie Welton, along with their daughter, Sarah Welton. Sears instructed her children to greet Count Simon, and they promptly did so. The Count's wife remarked on how beautiful they were, and Sears thanked her, adding that they were also very intelligent. The Count's wife laughed and acknowledged Sears' remark. Count Simon focused his gaze on Jamie, scanning his entire body. Jamie smiled and thought to himself, "Let him look. I'll show him my strength." The corners of the Count's lips rose upward, indicating a hint of intrigue, asked if his name was Jamie. He confirmed his words with a smile, and the Count said that they would talk to him later. Jamie agreed, and after that, the Count went to other guests. Jamie thought that, as expected from Earl Simon, he had exceeded all his expectations. He couldn't wait for their second meeting.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more content. Feel free to leave a comment down below sharing your thoughts or suggestions. If you want to stay updated on all our latest uploads, click the notification bell icon. And hey, why not check out some of our other videos popping up on the screen right now? If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by liking, sharing, and subscribing. It really means a lot. Peace.